A preliminary report on the deadly Air India crash on June 12 has just been released, and it narrows the focus of the investigation to the fuel control switches of the Boeing 787 jet. The full probe report will still take some time to come out, but what does the initial investigation reveal? The London bound flight began losing altitude after reaching a height of 650 feet and crashed seconds after taking off from Ahmedabad. 241 of the 242 people on board AI 171 were killed, and there were multiple casualties on the ground. One passenger, who was seated next to the emergency exit in seat 11A, escaped miraculously. The preliminary report, which is based on the flight and voice data recorders, commonly called the black box, and a simulation of AI 171's final moments, indicate that the crash may have something to do with the movement of the fuel control switches. So, what does the report say? Let's get into the specifics. On June 12, the Air India Boeing 787 flight AI423 from Delhi landed at Ahmedabad at 11:17 a.m. After a reported stab POS XDCR message in the tech log, Air India's engineers performed troubleshooting and cleared the aircraft for its next flight, AI171, to London Gatwick. This term refers to the stabilizer position transducer, a sensor system that monitors and reports the position of the horizontal stabilizer in the jet. It was flagged as faulty before the flight and cleared by maintenance after troubleshooting. While it may not be directly linked to the crash, it may indicate prior system or maintenance issues. Moving on. The flight took off from runway 23 at 1:37 p.m. The aircraft lifted off after achieving necessary takeoff speeds, but just moments later, both engines shut down in sequence. Fuel cutoff switches for both engines moved to the cutoff position 1 second apart. The cockpit audio has captured one pilot asking the other why were the engines cut off, with the latter denying having done so. The ram air turbine, or the RAT, also deployed, indicating a complete loss of engine power. Attempts to reignite the engines followed, with engine 1 showing recovery signs while engine 2 failing to regain stable power. A mayday call was made at 1:39 p.m., but before further communication, the aircraft crashed outside the airport perimeter. These inputs will again bring into focus questions around human intervention during the flight. The fuel switches help power the two engines in the jet. Experts ThePrint spoke to in the aftermath of the crash had indicated that a catastrophic issue with the engines was the most likely cause of such an air tragedy. This theory was backed by visuals that showed that the RAT deployed on the underside of the jet. There has been debate over whether this could have been a result of a mechanical failure or a human error. Now, the latest report has not raised any immediate concerns over mechanical failure linked to the switches in the aircraft. And likely because of this, there has been no bulletin sent out to airlines across the world for any change in how the 787s are operated. Something really rare must have happened on AI 171 for the movement of these switches. Why do I say that? That's because only a deliberate action can move these switches. They really can't be accidentally toggled. What you're seeing on your screens right now are two levers which are called the fuel control switches on the 787, one for each engine. In some aircraft, they're also called engine start levers. These switches are used very few times during a flight. They're used to start the engines, and once these are switched on, or as you can see on your screens, they are in the run mode, they're used again only to shut down the engines at the end of the flight, or they're moved to the cutoff mode. Unless, of course, there's a catastrophic tragedy like in the case of AI 171. These switches, located in the central console between the two pilots and right next to the thrust levers, are not like the light switches in our homes. While we wouldn't speculate on the very little available information we have, experts say that they just can't be flicked up and down. They first need to be held tightly, pulled up with force, and then they're toggled. They directly control something called the EECU, which is the Electronic Engine Control Unit. Essentially, in the cutoff mode, the switch starves the engine of fuel and shuts off its power. It is important to note that the report hasn't made it clear which specific human actions or mechanical events led to the movement of the fuel switches. The information available at this moment and its assessment still haven't been able to ascertain anything on whether improper, inadvertent, or intentional actions were behind the tragedy. While this is the first official and first hand clue to what may have caused the aircraft to crash so soon after takeoff, it is no surprise that the report reveals very little. Conclusions and responsibility for the tragedy are usually revealed only in the final report that comes many months later. As we have discussed in our previous videos, there's a global treaty that guides and governs such investigations across the world, and India is one of its signatories. This treaty is called the Convention of International Civil Aviation, and it is governed by the Montreal headquartered International Civil Aviation Organization, or the ICAO. Once the investigation takes shape and details emerge, the preliminary report is issued, and then a draft final report is made. This is prepared after all the in depth analysis is completed and stakeholders have had a look at the draft. Ever since the air crash, there has been wild speculation about the cause of the accident, and the internet is flooded with AI generated videos analyzing the incident. At ThePrint, we have maintained that we will stay far away from conjecture and will only rely on first hand or cross verified information to bring you stories and videos about this tragedy. I'll add links to our previous videos on how an air crash investigation plays out, how the rapid air turbine works, and what Flight Radar 24 told ThePrint in an interview about the initial data collected in the moments before the AI 171 crash. Please do watch them if you want more granular information about the things I have mentioned today and continue supporting ThePrint. We promise to keep bringing you responsible journalism. We will be back once we have more on the investigation into the air tragedy that was one of the worst disasters in India in many decades.